We went to. Yeah, this is my friend Meg. Hi, this is Sarah. Meg is actually a real friend from Oops. Okay,
Turun pada sekolah. Ini siapa namanya? Prende foto di space itu. Halo. Mana tagak sih indah sih show itu ya? Ja, oké. Ja, die ene. Sì, anche che andare via la macchina. Anel, smuin akan ya na metode. Smuin negosje na.
Hallo, die gaan zien. Pedenbrood eraan.
Nee. Credo che fosse così sempre. Della sa. Had a pale, nothing sure. I just flat on and next to the beach and MacMillian. Tina Harters nou naar de hele keer gegaan. Wat is dat? Laan orange, laan speelten misschien. Misschien, show me beter. Is dat Misje agus Schomber verboten is? Hij is in de tuin seo had natuurlijk Shane. Hij zat wat vat in de buik in de bovenlijf. Hello. There I get that.
I have to make an apology in advance because my fingers have been losing their feeling. It's peripheral neuropathy. So I can't feel the holes. I have to rely on sight and sounds to see, so I'm hitting the right place. Consequently, there's loads of whoopsies that I keep making, which is one of the main reasons I'm playing the small ones instead of the full-size ones, because if you miss a hole on the full-size ones, you really know it. I can just sort of stomp my foot or something like that. Anyway, the tune that I just played, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, great. So I won't need this fucker. The tune I just played is called Gàidheal's Welcome to the Northern Meeting. I learned that when I was a child. It was quite a popular tune for pipe bands, and my school pipe band played it, but I was the oddball because I always wanted to know the background to them, the tunes. And it turns out that Gàidheal, it's actually a farm which is in Lochaber, just east of Fort William, and it was part of the Cameron territory, and there was a drover there. Now the drovers were the people who led the cattle, really carried the cattle, across the countryside from the pastures to the marketplaces. And there was a very well-known drover by the name of John Cameron, who came from Gàidheal. And so he was John Cameron of Gàidheal, and well known by that name. He had massive herds that he could handle, and he was also very good at resolving disputes among herders, drovers, and indeed their clients. But back in those days, and I think it would be the early 19th century, every autumn in Inverness they had a piping competition called the Northern Meeting. And of course the droving was done in the autumn, and so after the droving was finished, John Cameron of Gàidheal would always make his way to Inverness to attend the Northern Meeting. And one year, as he was arriving, all the pipers got out together and greeted him with that tune which they had composed on his behalf. Gàidheal's Welcome to the Northern Meeting. So I'm the only one of the students who got that story behind it. The other just Now, drovers are a great source of stories. There's a lot of people in my family who are involved with drovers. I don't know if any people are actually drovers, but a lot of drovers are MacGregors. And the reason behind that is that the MacGregors, back in the Middle Ages, had a massive holding in the northeast of Argyll. And this was excellent cattle country, and they were renowned cattle herders and breeders. But in time, the Earls of Argyll pretty much dispossessed of them of their land. And so many of them took up to being drovers instead. Rob Roy is an example. He was a MacGregor who was a drover. So they used their talent with cattle to transport them on behalf of other people. Now, there once was a drover who was a tall man with long grey hair and a long grey beard. His name was Duncan MacGregor. And he'd been out droving for so long that even his plaid, all of his clothing, had faded from the sunlight to a greyish shade. And one autumn, as he was coming back from the droving, along came what we call Seanchas, the weather of certain elements. All of it came at once. It was a terrible, terrible storm, and he couldn't make his way to a shelter to sleep. But up there near the track, there was a hill, and you could see at the top of it, there was a clump of trees and a little hollow. And so he went up to the top there, he wrapped himself in his plaid and slept in the shelter of these trees. Now, I don't know if any of you slept outside in a storm in the autumn, only in a plaid, but let me tell you from experience, when you wake up in the morning, you're cold, wet, and hungry. So naturally, he looked round the back of this hillock, and there was a clump of houses there, a clachan as we call it, just a few houses, little ones with a thatched roof, and the smoke comes right through the thatch. They didn't have chimneys then because the fire was in the middle of the floor. But being the autumn, there was also the harvest going. And at the edge of this little clachan was a small field of barley, and there was a man in there cutting it with a corran, a sickle, and there were his children tying it into scuapan, stooks, to dry it. So as was the custom, Donald McGregor, Duncan McGregor, didn't bother stopping there. He went to the nearest house and walked right inside. There was a woman pounding away at dough. She was making bannocks, small bread loaves, because without an oven, that's as large as you can make in the way of bread. And he says to her, Àdhamh, I'm hungry. Simple as that. But she never even looked up at him. She carried on pounding the dough and said, I'm just too busy. I've got to feed the family. They're busy with the harvesting. Go elsewhere to ask for food. Not the custom at all. But nevertheless, he could do little else. He went on his way. And that's the last she saw of him. However, I will put these down. Because as she was pounding away at the dough, she started singing to herself a silly little tune she'd never heard before. And as she was doing it, the words came into her head and she started singing. Per mordia, Hanneken hier, jere bies getoeren hier. Per mordia, Hanneken hier, jere bies getoeren hier. That's a commotion. Anyone understand? No, okay, right. A big grey man, Hanneken hier, came from the west. Jere bies, he asked for food, getoeren hier, but he didn't get a bite. But it was such a nice wee tune, she started singing it to herself and then dancing around the fire. Of course, the fire is in the middle of the floor, as it should be. Snapping her flour-covered fingers and dancing round and round the fire. But in the meantime, the husband is out there still cutting the barley and his children tying it into stooks. So he says to his eldest daughter, Mother should be out here with food by this time. Maybe you should go back to the house, see if she needs some help. So the daughter goes back to the house. She looks inside, and there's her mother dancing around the fire and singing. So what does she do? She follows her. And the two of them dance around and around the fire singing, Well, after a while, there's the father still out there cutting the barley. He's just his older son. I think you should go and see if your mother and your sister are all right, because they should be back here by now. The boy went back to the house, and what did he see but his father, his mother, and his sister dancing around the fire? So of course he joined them. All three were singing, Well, to make a long story even longer, eventually all six of the children were dancing around the fire with the mother. And the poor father out there still cutting the barley on his own. So he went back to the house, but as he approached it, he could hear this strange song coming out the doorway. But being older and wiser, he didn't go inside. He went to an elderly neighbour, the sort you'd go to if you had an issue to explain. So this woman said, Fer mordia Hanneken hier. Well, that's interesting because a tall, grey-haired drover man came by here a while ago. He asked for food and I gave him some. But he's on his way home and I think we'd better catch up with him as soon as you can. So the farmer went and grabbed the best horse in the village, jumped on the back of it and rode as fast as he could up the trail until he caught up with Donald McGregor. He said, What have you done to my family? What's this guess, this spell you've put on them? Well, Donald McGregor says, Well, I think your family needed to learn the lesson, and perhaps they've learned it by now. So here's what you do. You go back to the house as quickly as you can, but don't go inside. Don't even look inside. But reach over the door, and in the lintel you will find a little wooden peg. Pull it out and throw it in the river. Don't look at them until that peg is in the river. So the man rode as fast as he could back to the clachan. He got on his horse and he went, and he could hear them singing faster and faster. He didn't look inside. He just put his arm inside the door, up over the lintel, and pulled out this wooden pig. He threw it into the river, and the moment it hit the water, his wife and his children all fell down on the floor, and they slept there for 3 days and 3 nights. They were so tired of dancing. Well, the poor man had to do all the barley harvesting and tie the stooks himself that year. And when I heard this story, I was told that the particular clachan there didn't often have drovers coming and stopping and asking for food. But if another one did come that way and ask for it, do you think he'd be fed or not?
Seamus Darloch, James MacDonald Reid, a national treasure and no mistake. Fáilte Creel Charstil, Charstin, very warm welcome to you. Thanks very much for Shannon and Dea for getting this happening again. My suspicion is that it's 2 years since we were last here. There we go. Time flies. We were having a debate about that. In Gaelic, of course, so that nobody could understand what we're debating about. And it looked like we knew what we were talking about, you know. So it's Misha Àdhamh Bryn. I'm Àdhamh Bryn. Any proper OG Outlander fan will know who I am. Others won't. Aye. I've left all that madness behind me now, you know. No offence. No, brilliant times. I look back on it very fondly, but it was mental. There's no point in beating about the bush. It was absolutely mental. So I'll follow on now with something or other. I never write a set list. You might say, well, why didn't you just keep the set list from the last time you did this? Well, I never had a set list then either. So myself and my family, this is my daughter Kiva, Nivrin. So Kiva has over, well, our lifetime, which is now 17 and a half, 18 years. See, I've got that many kids that I not only lose count of how many kids I have, but how many years I've had them all, you know. I think I probably need to get the license renewed. And else get kids? You sound far too enthusiastic to have kids. Can you not just give me some groans so I can feel better? But thank you. I love them. They're my entire motivation to fight through this absolute utter inertia. Anyway, myself and my kids over the piece, ever since they were born, really, but more actively the last few years, my kids have been kind of backing me up on all the Gaelic lore that I've been attempting to save from the jaws of extinction, you know. And bit by bit, the kids have been building up their own repertoire. My other lassie, who's not here tonight, she's back at the house because she's coming out with me tomorrow. She's doing the big long Saturday shift with Dad doing Gaelic things. So our older sister's here tonight. This microphone won't behave itself. A bit like my kids know that long ago. Like, it's a firm hand that's necessary. A firm hand. Many times have you been told. Don't make me phone your grandfather. Right. So, and we've been working on these songs from Argyll that are otherwise lost. So the Gaelic tradition in central Argyll is just about, I mean, it is dead as a living tradition now. But there were various songs and stories that were sort of almost frozen in time in different collections, you know, linguists and folk collectors going out and they managed to save things. And we focused our attention on songs and stories that are otherwise not carried by anyone else. Lucky to be able to be in the company of people like Gillebride and Gillebride. Round of applause for the legend himself. And of course, James MacDonald Reid is absolutely, quite literally, our elder, and we've learned so much lore, so many stories and songs and bits of otherwise useless nonsense, but we consider it very valuable. And I'm sure you do too after hearing James tell a story there. It's really magnificent, and that kind of old school storytelling where there's no ostentatious sort of shouting and bawling and jumping about the stage. It's just let the lore speak for itself. That art is quite rare now. So you're getting a treat. You get a sweet tooth. That's just your sugar. So we've been working on these songs, and you're like, cut to the bloody chase and sing a song. I'll get there, right? But Shannon doesn't know where the bar is to put these drinks back where they belong. You know, nice one. Cheers. So these songs we've been kind of putting back together. Some of them are complete, some of them aren't, but we're just trying to get them out there and get them sung. So I'm going to start just with a wee rendition of a song that we put back together just recently, myself and Kiva's younger sister, Saoirse, which means freedom. Am I right? Am I right? We'll get there yet. And this song is about a clearance that took place in Argyll. So the folk were cleared off their land by the local landowner. And there's a big sort of nonsense about how Argyll never get cleared. There were no clearances, so it's rubbish. And this song attests to the clearance. But we only have a chorus and 2 verses. So what we're going to do is, well, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to sing the chorus 3 times to make the song look big. Right? So, now all I need to do is remember how it starts. Aye. Mochulu, 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 rische valle shaw. Smui rische nache, vandaar ich mo henner me. Poltalachs mach warst in der in gele hanige. The gen of Spianagarne, Bevekachar, Poltalache, Mocholo, Rische Valishaw, Smoodische Nache, Vandar, ich mo henner me. Der Hennig marsten Kölarn, Lut the Broin and Gàidheal, she shoot the rain the Vishrin, Magala Shucha Venmere, Mocholo, Rische Valishaw, Smoodische Nache, Vandar, ich mo henner me. I didn't forget the other verses. I actually don't have them. They may exist somewhere, but they've yet to be found. So with that song didn't have a tune. So myself and my young lassie composed that tune to it, which I hope you gentlemen feel is quite fitting. No, I mean, as seals of approval go, I may as well just go now. That's as good as it's going to get. Instead of which, I'll be polite and hang around and listen to this mad bugger who's about to. I've known him a long time. We can be that way with each other. No, I love him to bits. He's magic, and you're about to hear from him. Gillebride MacDonald with something or other.
Hello, Kimana. How are you all doing? I'm just coming out of hibernation after a long winter. It still feels like winter. Hope you're having a great time over. I'm sure you're going to have a fantastic few days. Well, I think you'll be fantastic singers and you'll know this next phrase, probably taught to you by Àdhamh himself, MacMillian down. Oh, yeah. I'm also going to teach you something else, something you may not know, but it's going to be really tricky. Can you all say Huko Rano? Rohu Vao. MacMillian down. Voyach. Huko Rano Rohu Vao. Perfect. So I think we have to work on you in one thing, and that is your confidence. So, as you know, that phrase means money and thou, my brown-haired lass, and voyoch is beautiful. So my beautiful brown-haired lass. This one is not for a horse. There's also lots of horses called money and down and so on. So this is a song from Argyle with a fantastic chorus. You can all sing along, and like all good Gaelic songs with a lovely and chirpy tune and jaunty chorus, it's not a very happy song. And it ends with them nailing down the coffin. But as I said, we're not quite sure who was nailed down, but it talks about going over the sea, and quite often, certainly a couple of songs in Argyle that I know of, they were taking people to be buried on a different island. And so this, I think, is this one. So,
however, she later burst free from the box, and it's now a Netflix miniseries.
I think that was embargoed for until the end of season. So please do join in. Please join in. Who got an oro who vaho monian down voyoch. Who got an oro who vaho. One more time. Who got an oro who vaho monian down voyoch. Who got an oro who vaho. Holmo hodi hargunai gumula namor vaun. Who got an oro who vaho monian down voyoch. Who got an oro who vaho. Faren kunjera chuak het gach bruach ro velting. Who got an oro who vaho monian down voyoch. Who got an oro who vaho. Himimbat sichian esian kasholo. Who got an oro who vaho monian down voyoch. Who got an oro who vaho. Cum chidochi ian cum chida migoel. Who got an oro who vaho monian down voyoch. Who got an oro who vaho. Sing kishtja chuang he the tunis tarnya. Who got an oro who vaho monian down voyoch. Who got an oro who vaho monian down voyoch. Who got an oro who vaho. A pleasure.
Should I use this or no? All right, I'm not so sure. Just shout if it's better one way or the other. There's been a lot of talk of Argyll, and there's a lot of tales from them, my goodness. But it's nice to know that there's still the tradition of stories being told in the old way, and even new ones arriving as circumstances change, but they have a lot of elements in them. There's one I heard a few years ago from an Argyll fellow about, I don't know if you've been around there, but there's a lot of roads in the upland parts of Argyll that are very narrow. If another car comes in the opposite direction, one of them has to pull over to let the other pass. The passing lanes, that's right. Anyway, it seems that one day a BMW was going along one of these roads with a man in a barber jacket driving it along, and he encountered an enormous flock of sheep, just completely blocking the road. So he had to shift down into second gear to make his way gradually among them. But as he got to the front of this flock, he saw there was the shepherd nearby. So he put his window down, called out to the shepherd, and he says, "You certainly have a lot of sheep, my man." And the shepherd says, "Yes, I have a very large flock. I'm quite proud of it, in fact." Well, the fellow in the BMW says, "Well, I'm new to the area, and I could do with something from my freezer. And I'm sure you could spare one. You have so many. I'll give you a challenge. I'm very good with numbers. If I can tell you exactly how many sheep you have with one glance, can I have my pick of one of them?" Well, the shepherd says, "Well, you know, I enjoy a challenge myself, so you just try." Well, the man in the barber jacket and BMW stuck his head out the window, looks around and says, 423. And the shepherd says, "Well, that's exactly right. How did you work that out?" The man says, "Well, I'm good with numbers, I told you." So he got out of his car, he went among the beasts, found his favorite, was about to put it in the back seat. The shepherd says, "Well, you're very good with numbers, I'll give you that, but I'm very good with people. I can suss out people pretty easily." Well, the man with the car says, "If that's the case, then tell me, what's my occupation?" Well, the shepherd says, "Let me think now. I reckon you must be the Animal Husbandry Advisor to the Highlands and Islands Development Board." The man in the BMW says, "That's exactly right. How did you work that out?" The shepherd says, "I'll tell you if you give me my dog back." I learned a lot of wee short songs when I was a boy, largely from my piping teachers. One in particular just had these wonderful little ones to give me the rhythms of some of the pipe tunes. And my goodness, I've probably forgotten more than I can remember, but some of them are quite fun. Larach the hackach and the larach the cry and the larach the vrock and the bort not a moya say each Ishabel in Hamish, Larach the hackach and the larach the cry and the larach the vrock and the bort not a moya say each Ishabel in Hamish, a rat monocoshik and a rat monocoshik and a rat monocoshik and a lack of the hame, say Ishabel in Hamish. One of my piping teachers once, very quickly, we were playing a jig. No, it was a hornpipe. Anyway, and he suddenly let out the words to me very quickly, and I can barely remember. I only got a wee snippet of them, which was Don Beck for Hulachich, like if you get brown. Little Donald at the back of the chest let off 20 farts. Which probably explains why he didn't tell me the whole song. Anyway, so what? Another tale, I think. The island of Tiree, which is in Argyll, is quite flat, which is unusual for the Western Isles. But the south side of it, there's a little hill, and right next to it is a little lochen, a small lake, just a tiny one, like a pond. And it's as if a giant had taken a scoop of the earth with its hand and put it beside it, so that that earth became the hill, and then the space where it was became the water. And there was a young lad who was born right beside that lochen, and unfortunately, his mother died in childbirth. So he was brought up by his father. But his father remarried, and unfortunately, his father died soon after, leaving this little Donald with his stepmother, who wasn't very fond of him, apart from the fact that he was a good labourer. There wasn't a job she could come up with that wasn't too hard for young Donald to deal with. So she put him to work constantly, never thanked him, always kept him under her thumb, working and working. Now, the main job that she provided for him was looking after the neighbours' goats. The people would bring their goats out in the morning, and Donald would have to collect them, take them up the hillock to graze during the day. Then in the evening, he'd have to bring them down and return them to all of their homes. That's a standard procedure all through Europe. I even saw that myself years ago in Bulgaria. They still did exactly the same thing. Although cows, strangely enough, knew their own way home. Cows knew their way home, no bother, but goats, not so. Anyway, one day he was coming down the hillock with his flock of goats, and as he was going past that little pond, the lochen, at the base of the hill, he saw a beautiful pony there, a fine, excellent young pony with very long hair. And around its neck was a fantastic leather bridle with metal studs in it, beautifully tooled. Well, that bridle itself was very, very valuable, let alone the pony, if he could have it, to help him with his work. So what Donald did was he got on all fours and hid himself among his own flock of goats and let them graze closer and closer to the shore of the lochen, getting closer and closer to that pony. Hooves were on backward. Now, keep that in mind. If you ever see a pony next to a lochen and its hooves are on backward, for goodness sake, don't try to get on its back. Because that is a definite indication it's a yachushka, a water horse. And if you try to get on it, even grab its mane, you will not be able to release yourself and it will pull you under the water. But Donald knew that. So he got closer and closer and closer. And then at the right moment, without touching the mane or any of the hairs, he reached up and grabbed the bridle. Well, the pony immediately started kicking, flicking from one side to the other, trying to put poor Donald on its back, but it couldn't do that. And it bucked and it kicked so much that it knocked the bridle off its neck and it jumped into the water and disappeared underneath it, leaving Donald with this wonderful, very valuable bridle. Well, of course, he couldn't take it home because his stepmother would obviously take it from him. So he climbed up the hillside, which he knew well because he'd seen there was a little hole up in the hillside among the rocks. And as everyone knows, if there's a hole in that kind of a hillside among the rocks, there's going to be very small people living inside it. But Donald went up and was about to hide this bridle in that hole in the hillside when he heard a voice coming out. And the voice said, "Put that bridle on that woman who calls herself your mime, your stepmother." No one knows who said that, but it was enough information for Donald. He went home very quietly, and sure enough, the door was open. His stepmother was sitting before the fire with her back to the door. Foolish woman. He crept up very slowly and quietly, and as he got closer enough, he threw the bridle over her head and it landed on her shoulders. As soon as it landed there, she jumped up from where she was sitting. She ran round and round the fire, faster and faster, but bending over each time she went round. She went out the door and 3 times round the small hut that they lived in, But the end of the third time round, she was on all fours. She'd turned into a beautiful pony and was grazing there at the side. Well, that was great news for Donald. He was rid of this ornery stepmother. But he also, oh, absolutely, he also had himself a pony to help out with his tasks. Now, a pony in a community like that is very, very good business because you can carry people's loads. And he started doing that. He would take everyone's loads they wanted, taking peat home, bringing hay back. But especially valuable would be if he could go down on the shore and help unload the boats and bring the loads up under the center of the island. But the shore there was very rocky. And so the pony would have to have shoes. So he'd earned enough. He took the pony to the blacksmith. And the blacksmith very carefully put a horseshoe on each of the 4 hooves. And of course, these hooves went the right way round. Well, he was so successful after that. He was carrying loads to and from the boats. Any part of the island he could handle quite fine because of this great, fine, strong pony and its beautiful horseshoes. But as time went on, the pony became more and more tired, and it started to become thin, so thin that it was getting weak. And after a while, it was obvious that the pony was not well anymore. So Donald took the pony inside, set it beside the fire, warmed it up, petted it, stroked it, and then he took off the bridle. And as soon as he took off that bridle, it shrunk up and turned back into his stepmother. And there she was, very weak, very thin, curled up in a ball, shaking. And he looked at her hands and her feet, and there were those horseshoes nailed to them. She was so thin and so light, Donald managed to carry her to the blacksmith, and the blacksmith took out each of the horseshoes, took out the nails, took them off, and Donald wrapped her hands and her feet in bandages, took her home, fed her broth, and looked after her beside the fire. Well, she became healthy again, and after that, she was much kinder to him. She didn't put him to the heavy tasks before. He sold the bridle and got a new pony, and then when he married, his stepmother became the best stepmother, mother-in-law of all.
Step-mother-in-law. Sounds like hard work. Not if you get a magic bridle, of course. That's stored, that one, you know. I thought we would just crack on with another story. The one that comes to mind, and it's a nice one for live translation, is a pirate story from Eilean Vule, Night of Gaelic. We're sticking with the Argyll theme, coming slightly further east.
2 microphones.
I suppose we could, not enough. Oh, good. So I'm going to tell the story in the old language, and this lass is going to translate it into the silly language. The one with the weird spelling system that nobody can get used to. Enough, through, though, plough. Trough. I mean, what?
I can't even pronounce.
Honestly, what have you people been doing?
Is this thing on?
It is. Give it a couple of.
Ooh.
Oh, controversial.
Oh yes.
Oh yes.
Not so good at the stage thing.
This is the training regimen. Marcin, mar a hwyl am eisiau.
Oh, As I was. No. I was just away thinking about.
Have
when they're
some
like,
cider.
like see when people are like, if you're nervous, like focus on a certain point in the room. So I was away up there thinking, like, just stare at that window right there. Don't. And then I forgot. Obviously,
There's a thing happening.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
From the top.
Wet your thrapple.
This is highly unprofessional.
Right, as we were, I just need to remember to move that can before I sit down. Nearly Christmas present. Anyway.
Or don't, and just add to the
are we
comedy
past the
thing.
water? Are we past the watershed yet? So,
Honestly.
you don't have to live with it, you know. Maar hoe is je niet?
As I was told,
Waar ver aan zijn heel en voelen?
there was a guy in Night.
Agus je een boter hier wat dries.
Oh, he was called Deaf Ian.
Deaf John.
Oh, right, Deaf John, aye.
Mm.
Either or.
Agus aan scale show me goor se maragasa boter.
And this story is about how he went deaf.
Ba is die een dolle machle feed se valle he.
So Ian used to go out with the guys in his own town.
Valle mache giaskach.
He used to go out fishing.
Agus va baat achke.
They had a boat.
Femel, nog zo.
Oh, aye.
Agus wie wat halse vos.
They'd be here and there,
Dollarash daarui.
going there and back.
Agus wat vier vaer jaskach.
And they were dead good at fishing. They were well good at fishing.
A galava show ter wat te mache giaskach.
But one of the days when they were out fishing,
Remember, these people don't speak
no,
Scots
I'm
either.
trying to hold back. I'm trying to hold back, but it's like
So
resisting
we've got this whole comedy routine where I do Gaelic and she does Lowland Scots.
I've just
you know.
broke the thing. Oh, never mind. That's
There we go.
meant to happen.
And we're back in the room. Nisha,
Right.
lava show.
One day,
Van Giaskach dol vier va.
the fishing was going very well,
Ach, maar glach is een haar.
but like a stone out of the air,
Hen in een spoenje erin.
the pirates arrived.
Agus hen ik een baat achtes in glory baat in vierde va show.
And their boat approached the Ian and his pal's boat,
Agus hen ik at er borst.
and they came on board.
Agus hoosje gaat er weer mara hule doen je was een water.
They started pure murdering everybody on the boat
Gus nach rot doe je se beer akelach ien.
until there was nobody left but Ian.
Agus wijzen, ik toosach gewaten.
He was at the front of the boat,
Agus van een spoenje erin, het zie naar het lui.
and the pirates were coming closer and closer to him. Oh,
You never heard that. Agus hoorst daar ook, na mara misjes, misschien doen je me
he said, "Don't kill me. I'm the last one."
Maar wat doe je, maar wees, maar een beetje doe je se hele aan. Hij zat, maar een beetje doe je aan. Hij doe je se aan als een eentje goed bar op saasje.
If there's no one left, then there's no one to tell everyone how brutal and evil you are.
Gierig, Irakel, zie je.
Oh, no one. Oh, shit.
Agus misschien hoorst dat, hier en dan ga ik het zien wel eens.
They were like, "Aye, you're right, actually."
Tjees je doe je een let met dat.
They were like, "What are we going to do with you then?"
Is hoorst dat, nisje haar zessen.
And then Ian's like, "Oh, let me think about that one."
Hoorst dat, in haar kistje cheese in haar zessen.
Tea. Oh, right. So he's like,
Tea chest.
so there's a tea chest over there.
Goed is je zien osklo. De graag naar haar stui goede maag. Agus misje goed aan.
So you can get that box, empty out all the contents, and shove me in there.
Sy'n sin fwt y siw, mwlach y chlwyd, agos na tarn yn y chwyd ar asian.
And all you need to do is slap on the lid and get all the nails back in.
Agos what's that? Smiling jaw.
They're like, ah, ha, 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 yes, we like this idea.
Agos sy'n ag yr oen at.
And that's what they done. They did. That's what they did.
That's what they gone done. Agos hen ag at i'n ansych hys y chi.
And then there was Ian in the chest of tea,
Agos hwc ata.
and they picked him up.
Agos hilak ata her y chliaich.
They threw him over the side of the boat,
Agos le sparst fas yn tal.
and with a big splash into the sea.
Nisje? Gynist dit yn y spwniet darin?
With it, unbeknown to the pirates,
Was gian ek ian.
Ian had a knife,
Agos wat tolvek a jenu ansych hys y chi.
and they'd made a wee hole in the chest of tea,
Cos yn fwt a fi gael anal.
so it could be breathing. It could breathe.
Rut feimal a sin.
Oh yes, they're very, very useful.
Agos at se va ek mwr.
And as he was at sea
Fa 3 laten is da oes.
for 3 days, 3 days and 2 nights,
Va fakal de tuile va sin na bevot na bevot.
he was sitting, like carving the hole bigger and bigger.
Nisje? Se maar a hacher at se va a mach yn Erike. In the woods.
So as he was out at sea, as it happened, as he was out at sea,
Henny gelan.
a storm came.
Agos si gelan uasach mwr o fan.
It was a heavy, terrible storm.
Agos si mar a hacher gyn denig yn dwsgen uas.
And so the water was coming down, it was pissing a rain.
That's it. Indeed, as they say in English, the rain. As we say in Gaelic, the water. Agos fa gyw arian.
There was an awful wind.
Agos fa cys y ti a sio tidach uasach dy hiain.
And this chest of tea was just awful to Ian.
Agos fa dolarash sa rwy, agos fa na tŵn y bwal o'r eisiau hysio.
It was going back and forth, and the waves were hitting the box, the chest.
Agos fa ian genw mŵn, agos cach, agos a chwlwyr tan sy hysio.
He was excreting many bodily fluids into the box.
Kevin Everin! That's not what I said. Oh, perfect command of euphemism at 17 years old. Boosh! I mean, 18 years old. So, my year o hawl. Hwcan ere gyro chi ar asgo chir.
At long last, he noticed that he'd arrived back at land.
Agos, fa ere chlatach a fa sio.
And he was on this beach.
Agos, an sy'n am sy'n bechlechgyn efec yn gro an sy'n at sio efi chien yn nuas sy'n yn casan uarachw an sy'n tal.
So at this time, it was very common for cows to come down and wet their feet in the sea.
Yn casan uarachw.
Oh, well, they would also get wet, but it was mainly for purposes of cooling. Yeah, I don't know how to.
You know how all your cows like to cool their feet down? Even people in cow costumes like to cool their feet down, let me tell you. Agos fa taran, cwjach.
There was a bull as well.
Agos fa an tara Geneva Hall hay lys chro.
The bull was having its way with the cows.
Agos fa hi se cyntal son y fod y warchw.
No thanks. I don't remember that being part of the story when I was away.
Ach, yw. and Jay dan grow of his intach and gala the suas in the glatter.
So after the cows were there for a while, they left.
Ach, gan and dara.
That wasn't funny. The bull stayed.
Agus va gleonach jansach go Jay van Grene was a history show.
The bull was well keen to find out what was in this chest.
Agus henny gas va puturische hisches va dolarash sarui. Hij zat ver wie gas not agus ga shooten neer agus vergen jansach go Jay van Grene van.
The bull was having a sniff and a swatch, and it was trying to figure out what was in this box.
Agus that's va Jay nu shin. Voalerische hische agus va hische tulku sin shin hucha.
So as he was doing this, he was hitting the box, and it was like that, and then it fell, and the
I
lid
guess-
came off.
I had
No,
Derek.
maybe it didn't. I think I just made I think I made that bit up.
that does it.
It's not the only one making bits up.
What kind of bits are we talking about here? She's my daughter, isn't she? No mistaking it. She's far better looking than me, but
No, I just snuck in through the back door.
Ach, you.
Oh. I keep breathing into this mic as well. I'm pure like.
Just like the bull. With a heavy bull breathing.
Oh,
Yeah.
aye.
Ach, you.
Als je veel tussen Broin en Doosje.
Ach, you.
Oh, anyway, right. just battered my face on that. Right, I need to.
Gàidheal. Maar a hacher, der hoedse giestje. Ze begeert te zien gro een tol. Hij zat moorke de organ boeren de giene a lava goed.
So when the box fell over, the hole was big enough so that Ian was able to put his hand through
Van de vijf wie goed bij religion skeen.
because he'd been working at it with a knife.
Agus at ze gij en tara mangoors de giestje.
So as the bull made its way around the box,
Hoe hij in a lava macher een tol. Agus hoe ka gremer erbel en terra.
so Ian reached out and grabbed the bull's tail.
Agus gliesken tara.
The bull,
Shut itself.
aye.
Yeah, I was meant to say that, and she was meant to come up with a euphemism to match.
No, because
but
I don't.
Anyway, that's what we say in Glasgow, but it startled. It startled.
Soiled
Agus
itself.
wat she mar a hacher kun de leut dat een soos en glatig.
So it dragged Ian up the beach.
Agus a kumal grebeers is je goed be goed me jero ten boos agus den spianne beweken.
It was dragging Ian up the beach, and Ian was holding on with what little strength they'd had left after his days in the sea.
Agus hacher kun doar go kenne glatig.
And it happened that they made it to the top, the head of the beach.
Kierig. Agus a boeren de geen greme gumler en taratuli.
And Ian couldn't hold on to the bull any longer.
Agus lik a est den erbel.
He let go of its tail.
Agus sinach da na lai anse histichi. Fake chico kuchikinas in the howl.
So Ian was lying there just waiting to see if anybody would. At least I didn't do it into the mic. So Ian
Neither did I.
I know, I was just talking about how much of a polite person I am.
You might want to bring some of that home.
Touche, my guy. Touche, my man. My old man.
Right, that's enough of you. Machine Henny Portnich is a valle a bedlui die zich laatdag kus meurig Russo.
So the women of the nearest village came to find some shellfish on the beach.
Agus at sa bheit a géanú sin chonig at a chiste
And as they were doing that, they found the box.
Agus húca an éire go cúte in is stuan.
And they noticed that there was somebody in the box.
A cha búringai múlach na kiste a horst far na kiste.
But they couldn't take the lid. They couldn't get the lid off the box.
Mar sin chaid arás hú na bhela agus huarad na fír.
So they went back to the village and got the men.
Agus he lets in the Gaelic and agus the oors agus cruihi mar sin.
So they came back with various tools.
Agus rúna den graach a múlach a horst far na kiste.
And they managed to crack the lid off of the box.
Agus gútear a gorst an cach sa mún amach.
And unfortunately, it was not a great sight. As for the...
Sin agad a ní sin na graach.
There was a bit of a spillage.
Ach go Cook.
See, that's not necessary either.
Co was a kiste ach Ian.
Who was in the box? But Ian. Who would have thought?
Agus co avans na túine a hénig san na haulu ach muinte de bhela hé.
So, and who were the folk that came to save him, but the people of his own village?
Mar sin bhair fallabach fat trí lá an is dáich agus a tílach den jarach látach for a gaga.
So he went out on a wee trip for 3 days and returned to where he had first from whence
From whence
yes,
he came.
from whence he
Yeah.
came. Yeah.
Níse húca tún an léa
So they took him to the doctor
an an tub avore.
in Tuppervore,
Agus ga is an berger Ian.
and they had a quick swatch at Ian.
Agus hachar go Ian slán falling.
And it happened that Ian was full and healthy. Fully very healthy.
Heel and hearty.
Yes.
Ach. No, va cod ich chile carcass moon arcahu. Va boar.
But you know what he's talking about again. This guy. I can't take him anywhere.
Va boar.
He was deaf.
Níse. Jimmer a gas a boar.
But how did he grow to be deaf?
Berg do you be?
Does anybody have any ideas? The audience. Tough crowd.
I just heard somebody say because of the shit. That's that problem solved. San van na tuin na bolo histe fat na hoonje vashin a gas a boar.
It was because of the waves that were constantly hitting off the side of the box that he became deaf.
I guess ma she breg vuamse she breg ganse.
If it's a lie from me, it's a lie told to me. Yeah.
Aye. It's
Aye.
a lie I tell, it was a lie I was told.
Aye.
She not going to
That's the news for today. Sky News at 6.
And the main news tonight.
It's too show. Aye, it's too show. Aye.
Jay Gucci
Aye.
on it good. And not a spot of cider on me. That was the favourite moment of my entire life. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Gillebride MacDonald. You're not wanting another drink of this, are you?
Well, how do you follow that? Well, I think it is an important thing to say that in today's world, it's very hard to raise a child bilingually, especially in a minority language. So I think what you've heard today is absolutely fantastic. So give them a huge cheer. And although I said minority language, I think we should all from now on say minoritized, because so many of the languages that are now called minority languages aren't minority languages by accident. It's often by a larger language, a neighbor, by government, by authority, saying that people shouldn't speak that language. So so I think it's very hard to do, especially in the city as well. So again, give them a huge cheer. But I'll tell you a little. I grew up on the island of South Uist, and our house would have been called a Cayley house. Now, a Cayley house is a place where people would go to visit and to talk. So my father and my mother always spoke Gaelic to each other, and all the children and all my brothers and sisters, we still speak Gaelic to each other. Gaelic was the language of the community. When you go to the shop, to the school, we would speak Gaelic, and Gaelic is my first language, and I learned English in school. But when people would come to visit, invariably on a Saturday or Sunday night, they would talk importantly about one thing, especially, but apart from news and what was on, but also patronymics and who you belong to. So they would talk about grandparents, great-grandparents, great-grandparents, first or second cousins, and so on. And everyone was related as well. And they would talk about those people as if they knew them intimately. So they would just talk about what they looked like, what kind of personalities they had. But of course, they had never met these people. It was just stories passed down from one generation to the next. So it's really important to regain some of those songs and stories, but it's equally important, I think, to create new songs and new stories and have something, as well as the old to pass on, something to pass on from today, which makes it a living culture as well. So I write my own songs. So I'm going to tell you about this song in particular, and it's called Umbal. It's called The Dance. And I come from a big family, so there's lots of brothers and sisters. And a few years ago, my late father now, he had been ill. He'd very fit and healthy his whole life. And he was a crofter, fisherman. And suddenly he became ill. He had a brain tumor, and then he got an infection in hospital. But he managed to recover, and he seemed to just keep going until the 50th wedding anniversary. And shortly after the 50th wedding anniversary, he sadly died. But he managed to be there for his 50th wedding anniversary. Now, my dad was 6'4", verging on 6'5", 6'6", and my mother is still alive, and my mother is about 5'2". But one of the memories I have of growing up is going to what we then call Cayleys as well, which would be the dance. So you'd have the Cayley in the house, but also we'd call the Cayley going to a dance, and people would sing. You'd have tea and Adhamh and so on, and people would dance. So my mother and father were fantastic dancers. They were gliding along the dance floor, one very tall, one very short, but just seemed to be just kind of old style dancing with such ease. So at the 50th wedding anniversary, my dad couldn't dance at this point, and he was just in a chair. So I went and sat beside him, and all his children, grandchildren were there dancing. And I thought it was such a beautiful moment to be with him. And of course, I said to him, "How are you feeling?" And he said, "Oh, feeling good. It's great. Everyone's here. But I can't believe all my children are such terrible dancers." So I thought I'll write him a song that he can dance in his mind and in his memory. So this song is a song I composed for their 50th wedding anniversary. It's called Umbal. Now we're going to have a break after this. And if you fancy as well, you can buy Àdhamh a drink, possibly. And I've got some CDs for sale as well, with this song on it. And also, if you don't have a CD player anymore, it's great for frightening the birds away from your allotment. And Seamus here well, I'm sure he'll be around for a chat as well at the break time. But I'm going to sing the song Mbal for you. It's called The Dance. So here goes.
If they put the CD on, you then saying that it will attract the birds into the
Oh, yeah, good too. Yeah. Indeed, yeah. So I want you to just think of somebody important to you and see them dancing in your mind and in your memory. Sholatar sin haran var. Cast the cautious love thee live. Carmashach the pulla hul. Kain chanyer lion moik fine alling Àdhamh bal. Kain chanyer lion moik fine alling Àdhamh bal is. She should dance a tuv the tuv. Calls down a bola vas shane nord and pokaling. Scales down a whole sounds when you cars just real post green. Yes, she should dance a tuv the tuv. Sketanish chaklunyan lark, skasalemanish jekstat, shimagai hyonadain shu waltz, read by shaliket blian. Achat sanyanach in pirach ger down shim nar nichin hen. At sanyanach in pirach ger down shim nar nichin hen is. Shol shivos kyun kachach. Kjols daus a bola vas shane nord and pokaling. Scales down a whole sounds when you cars just real post cring. Yes, she should daus a tuv the tuv. Kjols daus a bola vas shane nord and pokaling. Scales down a whole sounds when you cars just real post cring. Yes, she should dance to the tuv. Appellation. So we'll be back in 15 minutes, but we'll see you up at the top.
That's why I went to try it. They're all. And there's another lady here who is also. Yeah, he does about once a month, and I take turns to post. Oh, that's cool. There was stuff in pictures. There was one we were all behind. But it actually dug out canal and built
I know.
but it's in the midst of the
Ano mo ta? O'Hain and Doshak bita. Yeah, there you are.
The skill.
Sure, it's be hopeless though.
Off to the Kelpies tomorrow morning. So
Oh, aye.
this is me out of bed just a few hours ago for the first time in 4 days.
Ah,
Such a Monday night. I haven't been that sick since I was a child, and I had the worst dream I've ever had in my whole life.
wow.
The dream was that every part of my body was fighting the other parts of the body. There was a war going on.
Bloody hell. Wonder what the old ones would say about that, eh? So, what you get kind of sickness like a.
Well, I started with a throat infection, which I'd had before, but it came back.
Yeah, because you gave it to me.
Right? It was,
I've been ill.
everywhere. It was
Still.
everywhere.
Yeah,
It was
Ben's
really-
got it, everybody's got it.
Everybody's got it.
Yeah.
But I got over it. It came back. But I've got the peripheral neuropathy, so I get often pains in my feet at night,
Aye.
the toes. But on Monday night, it was the whole legs and the whole arms, burning. So I had a dream. I've never had a dream like this before, where each part of my body was fighting the other parts. So this is me out of bed for the first time since Monday. But I've got to go to the Kelpies tomorrow to tell stories while walking around with people. So.
Well, sounds like you could be doing with a horse.
You're good. Oh, thank you so much.
Kiva. Yeah, like, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
So I've just been informed that the technician needs to leave by 10.
So, what time's it now?
So she needs to clear the stage. It's
Oh.
8:52.
Oh, plenty of time. So, go another hour. We've got an hour.
So-
Brilliant.
She just needs to clear the stage so she can catch the train back to Glasgow.
Grand. Yeah, that'll be grand, yeah.
Your daughter is a cracker and she is a chip off the block.
She's good. She was absolutely wrong with me about 5 times.
I know.
I was just like,
You're going to get hit for that.
So,
But yes,
yeah, I think she's well and truly earned a wee cut off my
I think
cash
so.
tonight.
I think so.
Yeah, so got what else cleared up once we go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, she's doing brilliant. You guys, everybody's loving it.
yeah.
They always look forward to this. Thank you so much for joining us.
People here.
Yes.
All right.
I used to bus them when I was quite regularly
Oh.
to get across Europe. So,
Prost.
We've got quite a few from all over the world.
no one from Bulgaria.
Maybe we might have to look. We have keepers for everywhere.
Because I can speak Bulgarian.
I'm not sure.
Why don't I find that out just now before just well, Kevin, Gillebride.
See, while we're waiting on our other esteemed guests, while we're waiting on the civilized ones, I'm very happy we've got some Dutch folk in tonight. So I've been going to the Netherlands for the last decade and going absolutely wild. and singing and dancing and just generally making merry. Eh? Well, I mean, see, when you've made an art out of it all your life, people expect it. So it's no longer misbehaving, is it? You know, that's my line, and I'm sticking to it. But I also wanted to just ask, where there's someone from Italy, there's folks from the States and Canada. There's someone up from down south who had relations from Persia. I was pretty impressed with that. From Dumfries, aye. MacLaurin. Where else are folk from? Anybody from anywhere else? Oh, right. Right on. Oh, you're nowhere, you. Well, you're not far up the road, at least. Anybody else? Oh, no, you don't want to be for there. Oh, murder Polish, man. I'm an adopted Glaswegian, you see. So my loyalties lie to the west. I'm going to get kicked out of here quick, aren't I? Anybody else? That's not round the corner. So, aye, that'll be more than a cab ride up the road. Excellent. Marvellous. Oh, I right. Oh, Minnesota, you're just about Scottish there, eh? Lots of Scandinavian folks in that area as well, no? Yeah. Los Angeles. I enjoyed Los Angeles thoroughly, but I found it a game of two halves. Like, I loved half of it, absolutely loved it, and I hated the other half. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like, absolutely adored half. I thought it was fantastic. And the other half, I was like, oh no. You know, I'm like, I'm coming back here soon. No, I'm never coming back here ever again. Aye. No, listen, United States, I was treated like absolute gold there. Every single time I went to the States, I was treated with the most incredible hospitality, and I found the people incredible, that there was an immense get up and go. And that might not seem like the same country to you. You're thinking, where is this place he's talking about? But there's a particular type of kind of enthusiasm that people have in the States that we don't have here. And there's also a particular kind of thing we have here that people don't have in the States. So whenever you go to the place you're not from, you're kind of looking at all the positives. And I looked at the positives every time I was there and had a brilliant time. So I've got fantastic memories of the States. So thank you very much. Canada was no different. Absolutely magical time in Canada. I've been 3 times. For Outlander events, and it was just absolutely brilliant, amazing as well. So, and I've been to the Netherlands so much for things as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just owe such a debt all over the world. I'm never going to be able to return, you know. Anyway, you're back here, and I'm dishing out what I've got, so I hope it's good enough. We're going to start back again for the second half. We need to be well out of here by 10, so by 5:02 we need to be on the way up the stairs, so we've got an hour. Hamish, the scale na oran na rudigan. Tuliakat.
Scale like oran. Before I start, there was talk from Gillebride about how in a Highland family you often talk about your forebears, and you get the family tree recited over and over and over again, and all the little lore about them and so on. And I, of course, got that when I was a child. And I got a lot of the tales of the Jacobites and our family's involvement with them. But I was quite young when I heard that. And they actually had a dirk, which they claimed was from that era. And I brought it tonight. This is peripheral neuropathy I developed, so I have absolutely no sense of balance now. Anyway, thus the stick. This is the dirk. I did take it to the Museum of Scotland.
Behave yourselves now.
And they said it is definitely from that era, but whether it was actually used in the Jacobite Rising or no, there was no evidence. And we've got documentation in the family going back to the early 1800s, so we're pretty certain about that. But my brother and I did DNA tests, about 6 years ago. And we did them at different times and in different places. And we ended up with all kinds of DNA matches in Prince Edward Island in Canada, and contacted them and compared what we had in our documents and theirs. And it is actually the case that I seem to be the only person in Scotland left who is a direct descendant of Ronald MacDonald of Bordale, who is the man who greeted the prince when he first came ashore, and the last one to get him off on the ship to France. So this may well have been his dirk. And of course, we sang Jacobite songs when I was small, and I went to the mod and was corrected. I didn't have them right. For a start, they said that I couldn't pronounce a Gaelic L properly. I remember I was a wee boy and I was quite upset about that. Plus, I made a grammatical error with an irregular verb. But then later on, I met a professor, the late William Matheson, who asked me to sing it the way I learned it. And he said, that's the Araseg L. And he also said that I got it right because they changed that verb later on. And in the Araseg dialect, I had it the right way and it had the internal rhyming scheme. So there we are. So this is straight from the horse's mouth. Oh, hee-dee-dee, hi-chee, oh, hee-dee-dee, ree-ha-voing, ye-vam-me-chan, maram-sarn-ye-chuk, sprakkelen-ye-dee-yankoik, saving-nomse, hi-chee, makan-ree, lee-ha-voing, slis-mori-o-dan-chi-karamak, klaiabas-tarakach-nambo, oh, hee-dee-dee, hi-chee, oh, hee-dee-dee, Ree-ha-voing, ye-vam-me-chan, maram-sarn-ye-chuk, sprakkelen-ye-dee-yankoik, Sama-ching, har-en-tale, ham-fer-art-de-salje-snoog, markige-sontag, jesnen-stjeetjak, rachike-hetere-manse-roik, oh, hee-dee-dee, ha-ching, oh, hee-dee-dee, ree-ha-voing, ye-vam-me-chan, maram-sarn-ye-chuk, sprakkelen-ye-dee-yankoik, taramanda-fipa is de vratig, kudig het spirit brassen vloog, je de garnarten is haar negne, skudde met je de frasken roik, oh, hee-dee-dee, hi-ching, oh, hee-dee-dee, ree-ha-voing, ye-vam-me-chan, maram-sarn-ye-chuk, sprakkelen-ye-dee-yankoik. There's a wonderful word in the last line of that, praskan, which just means a rabble, just people who are of no use whatsoever. And it's an odd word. I don't hear it used in common conversation nowadays. But again, asking Willie Matheson, he says, it's actually from the English word press gang. It was adopted into Gaelic to mean a group of people who are just horrible. Anyway, so I'll probably still use this because this is being onto the internet. This speaks a person who does not have a smartphone. I don't even have any appliances, so there you go. But tomorrow morning I have to go to the Kelpies, as they call them, these statues of two horses' heads. You know this site. I haven't been there before. I've seen it from a distance, but not close up. And I have to tell stories there. But I was told, actually, by Donald Smith recently that originally they weren't meant to be Kelpies there, but the old horse of Manu, which was the kingdom in ancient times of around the River Forth. And I don't know if you've been to central Scotland, but the biggest body of running water we have, as far as volume goes, is the Tay. And it comes from Loch Tay, which is right pretty much in the centre of Scotland. It's just south of the absolute central point of the whole country. And wonderful place names around there. Tay in Gaelic is Tug, which means a choice. I don't know if it really comes from that. I'd have to ask a specialist in place names.
Very ancient, actually.
That's
kind of coincidental.
Yeah, I think it's a coincidence.
Yeah.
The other one, of course, the big mountain on the north side of it is Ben Lawers. And we were, of course, told it was called that because it's a speaking mountain. Lawers. And I was told, anyway, by a family there called MacDonald, that it was called that because the wind would run behind the waterfalls and make the sound of speaking. So it was a speaking mountain. But on the north shore of it, more to the west end, is a small village called Moorlaken. It's really just a clump of farms now. But it extends out into the loch itself. And people lived in little houses on the edge of the loch. And at their backs was a clump of trees. And behind that clump of trees, protected from the winds of the loch, was a remarkable pasture with wonderful cattle. The clan who lived in that area were mostly MacNabs. Macanaba means son of the abbot, because very often people had children and then went into the clergy later in their life. So someone growing up would say, oh, my father's a priest, my father's an abbot, whatever, a monk even. Thus, Macavanish in Uist. But one fellow there, Dol MacNab, it's so amazing how many of the stories the lead character is called Dol, but that's standard. And he had the best cows of anyone, a magnificent herd of them, really beautiful. And of course, he was greatly admired for his cows. But one morning, as he was going to tend them, he, of course, had to walk through the woods, as he normally would. But in this morning, it was quite dark and a bit misty, but he stumbled on something in the ground, maybe a rock or a tree stump. But he looked down, and it was a skull, a human skull, just there in the ground. He was quite surprised at this, so he said, "Gee, who the hen shaw? What's brought you here?" And the jaw of the skull opened, and it said, "Kus laverst," too much talking. Well, Donald had never encountered a skull that spoke before. He'd never even heard of one. So he put his stump down, put his plate down, and he sat in front of the skull and he had a wee chat with it. Donald told the skull all about his cows and how great they were. And the skull told him about his life and what it was like when he still had a body and some flesh on it and a brain inside and a tongue. But eventually they went and had a nice chat. And so that was enough of it. Donald had to look after his cows. So he went up, left the skull alone, and looked after the cows. In the evening, as always happened, people gathered together in the Cayley house, and they were sitting around. Folk were mending nets, people mending other things, polishing their boots, stitching things, and so on. And of course, everyone was chatting, telling stories, and about what they did during the day. And of course, Donald said, "Oh, by the way, when I was going through the woods, I met a skull that spoke, and I had a chat with it." Well, his family was quite surprised about that and said, "My goodness sake, that's really unusual. You know that the king is very interested in unusual phenomenon. I think you should go to Stirling and tell the king." Now, that dates the story somewhat because it was in the 16th century that the kings were based in Stirling, 15th into the 16th century. So the next day, his cousins offered to look after his cows while he went away, gave him a good plaid and some food, and he made his way down to Stirling. But when he got there was no way of getting inside the castle. So he went to the gates, and there were many other people sitting out in their plaids with their food, waiting for an opportunity maybe to speak to the king. So he had to wait there quite a long time, several days, in fact. And then he saw coming from the north a huge band of people, all on horseback, or mostly on horseback, some servants on foot. And they were carrying the bodies of deer. It was a hunting party. And there at the head was a man with long red hair and a long red beard. And he had a golden circlet on his head. That must have been the king. So as they approached the castle, Dol MacNab ran up and threw himself down in front of the king's horse. An old custom, it seems. The king had to come to a stop. And he said, "Why are you delaying me?" And Donald MacNab stood up and said, "Your Grace, I have found a skull that can speak." Well, the king said, "That is very interesting to me, and I would like to hear all about it. But I will warn you, I do not like having my time wasted. So you'd better be telling me the truth." Well, Donald said, "I am telling you the truth. That is really the truth." So the king said to some of his henchmen, "Take this fellow inside, give him some food, give him some wine, and then bring him into my chambers once he's cleaned up a bit." So, sure enough, Donald was brought into Stirling Castle. He was fed, given wine, some nice new clothes, was cleaned up, and he came into the king's presence and told him about the skull and all the things the skull had said to him. "Well," says the king, "I'm very impressed by this. And tomorrow I will have you sent back up to your community on Loch Tay with 2 guardsmen who will witness. And if the skull really speaks, you will be greatly rewarded. If it doesn't speak, and you're wasting my time, we'll cut your head off and see if your skull can speak." Well, Donald was convinced he had spoken with the skull. So the next morning, with the 2 guardsmen, they went back up the River Tay to Loch Tay. They took the guardsmen into their village of Merlagan. They fed them and looked after them. And the next morning, Donald took them through the woods, and there was the skull. So Donald said to the skull, "What's brought you here?" And the skull said nothing. Donald said, "Adhamh, don't you recognize me? Don't you know me?" The skull didn't move. It said nothing. Donald argued with it. He reminded it of all the things they'd said together. He threatened it, but no, it wouldn't speak. And so poor Donald was taken back to Stirling and taken back to the king. And the guardsman said, "No, the skull doesn't speak." Well, the king said, "I'm afraid I don't like my time wasted, and you've certainly wasted a lot of time here. So I'm going to put you in the prison, and you will be executed on Monday because I don't have executions on Sundays. I'm a pious man. But I'm also a merciful man, and therefore members of your family will be given an opportunity to come and see you for the last time if they can make their way all the way here. And also, because I'm a very curious man and a merciful man, I will give you an opportunity to save yourself. So before you go to the scaffold, I will ask you 3 questions. And if you can answer all 3 questions correctly, your life will be spared. If you get any of them wrong, you will be beheaded." And so Donald was taken into the prison. Well, between then and the execution day, several of his families came to visit him for the last time. And among them was his cousin by the name of Unisgorach. That means Daft Angus. Now, he was called that not because he was really stupid, but because he came up with really odd things to say. He was a bit an unusual fellow, and he wasn't very well to do. He didn't have cows of his own. But he did come to visit Donald on the last day, on the Sunday, and the 2 of them were just there in the cell, and they looked very much alike. So Unisgorach said to his cousin Donald, "Now, listen, if you get executed, that's a big loss for you because you have the best cattle of anyone around, whereas I have none, so it wouldn't be a great loss for me to lose my life. But we look so much alike. Why don't we just change clothing? You can go home, and I'll stay here in your place. And if I can answer all 3 of the king's questions correctly, can I have my pick of my favorite of your cows?" Well, that was certainly the best offer Donald had had all day, probably in his life. And so he agreed. So the 2 of them changed clothing, and Unisgorach stayed there in the prison cell, and Donald MacNab went home free. On Monday, Unisgorach was taken into the king's chambers, and the king said to him, "Well, this is your last chance to save your life. I will give you 3 questions. Question number 1. I have great lands and palaces and treasures. what is my total value? And immediately Enniscorach said, your value doesn't come from lands or palaces or treasures. Those are temporal items. Your value comes from your wisdom and your judgment and your mercy. And the king had to agree to that one. So he said, okay, question number 2. I have traveled all over Christendom. How long would it take me to travel all the way around the world? Well, immediately Enniscorach said, well, the sun can do it in a day, and you can't go as fast as the sun, so it would take you more than a day. Well, the king was happy with that one. It gave him the opportunity to ask him the 3rd question. He said, all right, here's the final question. Now, as King of Scots, I sit before you with power over life and death. Tell me, what am I thinking right now? And immediately Enniscorach said, you're thinking I'm my cousin MacDonald. I changed clothes with him in prison yesterday, but he's gone home. And of course the king was thinking that. So he had to let him go. So Enniscorach made his way happily back to Murlochan, and they celebrated, the whole community together, that both Donald and Enniscorach had been saved. And so the next morning, Donald kept to his word and said, Enniscorach, you can go to my pasture and pick your favorite of my cows. And so Enniscorach set off through the woods. But it was actually still fairly dark and a bit misty. And as Enniscorach was making his way through the woods, he stumbled on something on the ground. Maybe a rock or a tree stump, but he looked down and it was that skull. So Enniscorach said to the skull, say who the hain shaw, what's brought you here? And the skull said, Cús lávarch, too much talking. And so Enniscorach left it alone and went and picked his favorite cow.
We have to follow each other, you know. I thought we would do a bit of singing. Yeah.
Oh.
Right, there's a couple of songs from our district that are worth repeating. This one's about a jilted lover who is all for getting married and setting up home with this lassie. And the lassie buggers off down to Glasgow, says she's going to New Zealand with this other fella she's bumped into. What actually happens is the other fella has bumped into some other lassie and he's already away in New Zealand. So the first lassie has to do the walk of shame back through all the villages where she told everybody that she was leaving the first man to go with the second man who left her to go with the new lassie. Right? Absolutely. And this song is by Alan MacMillian, Alan McLean, a red-haired fella who jilted, and it's all about how he's basically just sitting and laughing on the other side of his face, but also heartbroken. It's a song that it's very clear that he's got to use this lassie, but at the same time he can't help sticking the duck in and twisting it. Get me here the rang. I got this in the Seanchas column at Edinburgh. Mocht je kierten aan se vatten, sanagak met viadig, dolle jure heren ashik, zwoorden tarakus ni jemi. Chonne mi
Don si jera, si vakin marin ni neger. Chonne mi don si jera.
Reinig mi te je haar, haron je don ik ballen. Sanagala die de kabak mag een glas gewoon het beelden.
Million don si jerach, Bacain marin in eger, Honeb million don si jerach.
Gagi fisken fetting chide, der fährt na piatna mische, dolla bom herne dinje, kushilando asati deche.
Honeb million don si jerach, Si bacain marin in eger, Honeb million don si jerach.
Vai gietje van skachpade, Gunda goerie koerie allen, Snach passen die verroer in maren, Get by jaren sa gesprei.
Honeb million don si jerach, Si bacain marin in eger, Honeb million don si jerach.
Haro hier achtoler sale, de longbornen twee klaarste, haro kuschen marabalisch, sanaga esse ye.
Honeb million don si jerach, Si bacain marin in eger, Honeb million don si jerach.
Schiene mag vaar, nee, schiene niet vaar in rein of jaro. Daar was misje goffein en varal, sanlisch ook meneer en de viali mi de preken.
Honeb million don si jerach, Si bacain marin in eger, Honeb million don si jerach. Honeb million don si jerach, Si bacain marin in eger, Honeb million don si jerach.
Well, I was listening to Seamus's tale there. That's one I've never heard before. It's always a pleasure and a chore to continue my education with Seamus. And it got me thinking about another wee tale that I heard, much shorter one, but a similar kind of a theme. And the king, and I imagine it would likely be the same king, probably James IV, invited all the clan chiefs down to his castle in Stirling. And would this be the fella that painted his castle gold? Could have been. The outside of Stirling Castle once get painted gold. Talking about ostentation, you know. And so he invites the clan chiefs down. He wants to assert control. And it was around about the end of the 15th century that the Lordship of the Isles was first fated, because the Lordship of the Isles was rivaling the king in terms of power and influence. And the Lordship, the islands and Highlands of Scotland, under Clandon, the MacDonalds, they began making their own deals with the English king behind the Scottish king's back. You know, it's that kind of a sort of influence we're talking about. So the Scottish king couldn't be having this. So he invites all the chiefs down to Stirling, and they come to the Great Hall with their entourages, and they're sat around this massive banqueting table, and the hall is magnificent. It's huge. If anybody's been in the Great Hall in Stirling Castle, it's massive. And they're all sat around there, and they've got haunches of prime venison to eat, and fresh salmon, and goodness knows what else. You know, best imported wine, and right the way around the room, a massive big, lanterns. Thank you. Massive big lanterns. You know, they're burning with some sort of fat or grease or whatever. You know, and they really just illuminate the place beautifully. And MacLeod Convaken is there, so MacLeod Convaken is there, and he gets a wee bit full of wine, and he starts saying, the Curum an the Shaw. Show me your Curum Gui, the Hickshow Hun Convaken, in the Newland Skating. Show me your Curum Gui, she says to the king. So you come to the Isle of Skye, I'll show you a flaming party, says he to the king. Whoops. So the king, seeing a chance to take a trip to Skye at some point when MacLeod least expects it, says, oh well, can't marry Sheena. All right, fair enough, you know, I'll accept that. But when I come to Skye, then I expect to be treated to the best party ever known to man. So anyway, months go by, a couple of years goes by, and the king thinks this is about the right time to go up and see that MacLeod and call his bluff. So the king decides he's going to do a tour of the West Highlands and Islands, and off he goes with his retinue. And when he gets to Skye, MacLeod knows why he's coming. He got word long ago. He's been well informed that the king's on his way. And here's the king coming to call his bluff. So the king comes round to Dunvegan, to MacLeod's castle. And he says, right, I'll be coming into the castle and you'll be throwing this wonderful banquet for me that I've heard all about. It's apparently going to be better than mine in my golden castle with my huge big hall with all my lanterns round about and, you know, right, yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. And MacLeod says, oh, I'll throw you the party, all right, but you come to the wrong place. You want me to take you to where the party is? Ha! Says the king. It's just you fire on there. I'll be fine. Thinking, well, wait a minute, it's not in the castle, it's going to be rubbish. Where could it possibly be? It's been a rival still at the castle. Anyway, MacLeod takes the king and all his attendants and his retinue and his entourage and all the rest of it. And off they start tramping over the moor, the king, of course, on horseback, until they reach what are called MacLeod's tables. If you've ever been up the west coast of Skye, you may have seen MacLeod's tables. Hills that are flat on the top. And there's 2 or 3 of them, a tiny wee one, slightly bigger one, a big huge one. And the king gets led right up to the top of the biggest table. And on the crest of that hill, all the way around the outer edge of the table, are clansmen standing with giant lanterns burning all the way around the outside of that. So the king comes in between these lanterns and there's a massive table laden with all the freshest fare from the Isle of Skye. And MacLeod says, how do you think I did? The king says, aye, you got me. This is the best party I've ever been invited to in my life. And so it was that MacLeod made good in his promise. So my sheep bread warms the sheep bread gone. So it's a lie I tell, it is a lie I was told.
So, Maha, 300 years ago and 6 weeks ago, a little boy was born in the village of Glenorchy, near what is now the landmark of the Green Welly shop. You might have seen it on the way up in Tyndrum. But there's there's a big hill as you're driving past Tyndrum going to Glenorchy called Bendorain, and it's like a conical shaped hill. It's a beautiful, beautiful hill. And Donogh Ban McIntyre used to walk that hill as a youth. And then later on, he became a Jacobite. He, not quite sure why, but well, I suppose he was paid and he needed, money to pay for family and so on. He fought on the Hanoverian side in the Battle of Falkirk. But then he came and lived in Edinburgh, and he spent most of his later life in Edinburgh, and he worked in the City Guard. And in Edinburgh, he composed lots of songs, and this next song was composed here in Edinburgh, and it's called ORGANISER, the song for the Highland dress, about the repeal of the Disclothing Act of the 1780s, in June the 1780s. So he's praising those who repealed the act, saying what a terrible act it was that people couldn't wear the Highland dress, imploring people to go back to wearing the old style dress, the buckles and so on, and just to be proud of the Highland dress that they used to wear, and to go back to wearing the Highland dress. So this is ORGANISER, a song composed here in Edinburgh almost 300 years ago. Or, well, it was more than two. My maths isn't very good, but over 200 anyway. 240 plus. Hwyd min naiach gaswr ha tach na di rŵn moch di. Gymffaia mig pasan y dwch a chlech sy'n yn tŵs yr chim. On ha sy'n eglaniach yn ar y brynydd mar an byn. Siawi joch swan jyfon tros a hysig a chos siogyn. Chwna min juan dwn age yn common a fel y cryn. Li jyd yn orsta'n hwg sgel y tosioch a nefnish gyn. Pip gael fanyal yn gles y syniad a'ch greu yn tîm. Hwg sy'n ym ffolas yr nege co a here balich ddyn. Jech blina fichyd is corfa casag jen chlomer dream. Hwyd sy'n adagas cleoch schapwnyg yn siors at gyn. Bwch gynnad dŵnig y brog sy'n baril bydoch y lyn. Rhain yn droch asan y forn na bodig darnoi crigrin. Togyn y gel yn cawn chafiad yn bang na smw. Codyr gys yn tal chadjigeg y dall gyn. Begin don ddigish mi awn on chair com mawn chogiwn. Sgandreu gach finien an tral sgaffidd yn a'ch gal rwst. Hasyn yn comin yn nwas yn a chosyn le crwad o clw. Chwna le chom a chwad yn fynya chach e chwl. Oedd y cyn fewn yn gram a'ch shimmer ffwl ars na grwys. Sawn hamarcus yn ai amach i ganna yn jwch. Fabulous.
I have a slight postscript for that. The year that the appeal came through and people were allowed to wear Highland dress open again, although many did in the meantime, because if they were employed in any form by the government, they were allowed. But 1782 was the year of the appeal. And in celebration of it, several Scots painters and one Englishman, Paul Sandby, with Scots painters David Allen and Alexander Cars, went around and did a lot of paintings of people dancing and doing their usual procedures in the Highland dress of that time. And I went around and looked at all those paintings when I was a teenager, was fascinated by them. And I spoke to the woman who founded the Highland Folk Museum, who had some actual garments from then. And I copied the patterns. And ultimately, I made a replica of one of these outfits. And that's what I'm wearing tonight. And it's my second time wearing it in public. And I used all the original fibers. This is homespun linen. It's all wool. These buttons are made of wood. On the waistcoat, they're made of bone. So it's all the original stuff.
Why does that not surprise me? And got war on that scale of this?
Oh, Gabby. She's sure, sir.
Rudigan Ma. What kind of story is this? I said, something good.
Well, this takes us out of the Highlands, but it's a problem with the way the whole storytelling centre is set up. Is that it was set up about 35 years ago under the understanding, unless you're really special, you are part of a lineup. So that means the length of story is quite limited because everyone has to do their spot. And in the 35 years, I've never had a line of my own. So I've never been able to tell any of the longer stories. But a fellow that was sitting there earlier had to go because his girlfriend is flying to America in the morning and he has to get her up, is a cellist. And we put forward a proposal, which is the only thing that's acceptable, that he composes a piece of modern music on electronic cello to accompany a long story, which I will tell in the autumn. And the story takes 40 minutes. We proposed will be 40 minutes of story and 40 minutes of new music. So it'll be the first time in all these years I'll be able to tell a full length one. But we go through because we're only allowed the short ones, you keep having to go the same ones over and over, because not many that are that short. But the wee pipes that I was playing earlier, there was a traveller man, a tinker, who used to go around the countryside and repair things. His name was Willie McPhee, and he used to play wee pipes like that. It was part of how he earned his living, but he would spend most of the year travelling around the countryside and repairing pots and pans. He had a little toolkit with a saw and a soldering iron, screwdriver, all of those things. He'd go from house to house and say, do you have anything needs mending? Of course, that's no longer necessary in a day with Amazon and all that, but it was necessary in those days. But one autumn, as he was on his way home, again, as happens so often in stories, a huge snowstorm came down, and he was stuck in one of the villages or one of the bits of countryside in southern Scotland. Now, here's some advice for you, and don't forget this because you never know when you're going to need it. If you're stuck out in one of those communities, that part of the countryside, and a snowstorm comes down that's so deep that you can't make your way through it, find one of the little stone bridges, the little Humpty back ones, and go to that, because there will be a shelter under one side of it next to the river, and you can sleep there for the night. So, poor Willie McPhee, he'd been tramping all the year, and his boot soles had come away. So they were hanging off like big tongues, and every step that he took, another load of snow would get piled in with his feet, which was pretty miserable. So he saw in the distance there was a little Humpty back bridge, and he headed for that to take a shelter under it. When he got down under the shelter, another traveller man had got there before him and died. So there was a corpse underneath the bridge. Now, another piece of advice, if you're stuck out in the countryside in Scotland in a snowstorm, if you go under a bridge for shelter and you find there's a body there, just pull it by the ankles out to the start of the bridge, bury it in the snow, and then contact the police at the next village you get to. Don't forget that now. You never know. So Willie went and grabbed this corpse by the ankles. But when he looked, this poor man had died with an absolutely new pair of boots. And he was the same size as Willie. But of course, another thing to bear in mind is when you're dead, you don't need new boots. So it's perfectly legitimate to swap them around. So Willie tried to get these boots off, but rigor mortis had set in. The body was terribly stiff, and the laces were frozen. He kept trying and trying. He couldn't get the boots off. But another point is that when you're dead, you don't even need feet. And bear in mind, the body was frozen, so there's no mess. And Willie had his little saw, so he just very carefully over the boots just sawed those off. And he hung them around his neck so that when he could defrost them, he could, swap them later. And he went over to the other side of the bridge, having buried the rest of the body, the footless body, in the snow beside the bridge. But when he got to the other side of the bridge, he saw there was a little light in the distance. There was a farmhouse, just a bit one, not a very well-kept one, to be honest. But he could see that there was a light. So he trudged through the snow, still gathering more and more snow in his boots. He got to that light, and there was a window, and inside was a table and an elderly couple sitting there, and they had a roast goose, entire roast goose, a bowl of steaming tatties, and a bottle of whiskey. Plenty enough to share. So Willie chapped on the door, and the farm woman came to the door and said, "What is it you want, Tinkerman?" He said, "Well, listen, I have a little tiny bagpipe here, and if you don't mind sharing a bit of your food, I'll play for you." And she said, "No, it's all right. We're not really interested in that. We just want to get, so you go away and leave us to our meal." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I need somewhere to sleep tonight. And you can see the snow is very deep. And if I could repair your pots and pans, I've got a kit here, I could do that." She says, "No, we get that done in the village. It's not that far away." She said, "Away you go." So she slammed the door, and poor Willie was stuck outside. But he looked in that window again, and there really, really was quite enough to eat. But he chapped on the door again, and this time the farmer came to the door. And he said, "I thought my wife sent you away." And he said, "Well, listen, she did. But you can see how deep the snow is, and I just need somewhere to sleep tonight. And if you've got a cow shed or anywhere I could sleep." Well, the man said, "I'll tell you what, we've got a byre around the back, a cow's in there, and there's plenty of hay. You can sleep in that, but I want to make sure you're out of there before my wife comes to milk the cow in the morning." And Willie said, "I agree to that, I'll do it." So he trudged round the back, and there was a not very well kept byre and a scrawny cow inside, but there was plenty of hay indeed. So Willie took off his coat and made himself a bed in the hay loft, just above the cow. But remember, he had those boots with the frozen feet inside. So he put them down in front of the cow so that its breath would be on it overnight and help to thaw them out quickly so he could take the feet out in the morning. And off he went to the loft and went to sleep. But I'm afraid he slept in that night. He was so tired. He was awakened in the morning by the sound of the woman coming in with the pail and the stool. She sat it down next to the cow, and then she suddenly screamed and sent the bucket flying. She says, "My God, the coo's it, the piper. The cow's eating the piper." Well, of course, Willie's a kind man, and he didn't want to frighten him, but he wasn't properly dressed to jump down from the loft. So he took his little pipes out and started playing them. And her husband came in and he said, "That's his ghost after us. Let's out of here." And they ran away, and he never saw them again. And they left him on his own. They left the door open, so he went inside, and he had a nice cold feast of roast goose, tatties, and a big dram of whiskey, and he got himself a new pair of boots.
Oh, well, there's only one thing for it then. Just keep going with the footwear theme. So, a slight decline from boots to shoes. We'll get the heck away in the shop. So this is a wee anecdote. I may even have told it last time you were here, but it's worth repeating. From Lochaw side, I heard this from a wee fella that they used to call Sandy Screchan. A Screchan is a wee scream. Because Sandy Screchan used to talk like that. Anyway. Maar a whole emissions Gael.
As I heard the story.
But Shen Dunya agus Shen Vortnachan.
There was an old man and an old woman.
Agus Hule and Shen Dunya.
The old man died.
Ach, sure the van by Gierach it Prague and Ureten.
But he'd just get new shoes.
Maar Shen Horsen Shen Vortnach Rie.
So the old woman said to herself,
"Gee, I'm to the end in the Prague and show.
What am I going to do with these new shoes?
We have a fech gewoele career if we jikkel in the Prague and show to the ye.
It'd be a shame to have these shoes sitting about.
Gierach, couldn't waste.
Gierach.
Maar Shen Gloeroegesen.
How do you put this thing down?
Gloeroegesen. En dan mijn gwarster kaakjes moe als je iets.
Aye.
Gloeroeges.
Oh, close to them.
Maar zijn doen je het van nog.
There was another old man who lived there,
Ach, je het van waar ik trouw meer een joog.
but he was really heavy on the booze.
Ach, je haar opbraken ik.
But he didn't have any shoes.
Gal aan de braken.
He drank the shoes.
Maar zien, hoorst een schene woord nach is een jaar zo er ook kalm.
So the old woman said to this guy whose name was Callum,
Maar ook hier in de braken.
"Do you want the shoes?"
Hoorst ook cariro, ga mis in de braken.
He said, "Oh, aye, defo, I'll take them."
Agus, waar goed tal is chicken door a braken uren.
And he was so chuffed that he got new shoes.
Kun je ja, hoe de schoens.
He went to the pub
Let de braken uren.
with his new shoes on.
Agus, ga zie hoe de schoens.
He went down to the pub
Agus, wat tag kan aan de zien.
and he was a while in there.
Agus, ze was te zien, ga sa toe torach.
And as he was in the pub, it became very dark.
Agus, er heen ik aan mag, hij is gerojeren hier.
And when he came out, he was crying.
Wat jaren hier, van joeg hier.
Oh, he was drunk. But
Mm.
I mean, both sometimes come as a pair.
Agus, hoos je er weer veeg en ik koos je zo raad.
So he started to attempt to walk up the road.
Ach, je doet er van aan zijn naam zien toe logo.
But at that time, Locho.
The hell with the silly English bastardization. Logo.
I don't even know the English names for most places, to be fair.
Well, Ballabik, Ballachleich, Gach to Rajvik.
There was a wall of stone on each side of this wee road,
Ritu and Loch.
beside the loch,
Agus Kreun Gach to Cool and Bottlichen.
and there was trees on each side behind the walls.
Machine Haromor and Solace teacher an.
So there wasn't a lot of light at all.
Haroan nach na Ranak and Sigalach.
There was nothing but the stars and the moon.
Agus machine Hoshi Kalam mir Koshach, so raad.
So Callum started to walk or stumble up the road. Thanks for the demonstration.
Should have
Keep breathing into this mic. It's really bad. I'm trying to like every time I'm not talking, I'm trying to like, do that so I don't breathe into it.
All right, hen. You crack on with that. You crack on with that breathing caper. Agus va feachin little susarada haroa sarvachulish gema.
He was trying to get up the road, but he wasn't very successful.
Ach you, ha se va feachin sho hula fua mer cool hund in a ballischen.
But anyway, as he was making this attempt, he started hearing some noises behind the wall.
Agus kunig nach roan ach na ranakan sigalach.
But remember, there was no light but the stars and the moon.
Agus sin hulia.
So what he heard was
Chalom Kurjit Movragan.
Callum, take off my shoes. I'm not recreating that. That was enough.
Ien zit er hekke groen graaf. Agus hulish. Ach, nee, sin huile meter.
He was like, "That's not what I've heard at all."
Misschien goed maar eet.
So he kept going,
Ach, hen kan daar nou hoor.
but it came for a second time.
Chalom Kurjit Movragan.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I translate. Callum, take my shoes off.
Stay with it, hen, stay with it. And nu seo bheith éigeal ar Gàidheal.
This time he shot himself for reals.
I'm not translating that. Rwy'n acach na frikish. Agus ie cael dôl na babuai.
And he'd started trying to speed up,
Ach, a da harfig sinlish.
but it wasn't very successful with that either.
Gwys yn denig gwf a sin yn 3 uur.
And then the voice came for a third time,
Maar a hachlis an syhwle scale Gaelic.
as happens in every Gaelic tale.
A Callum! Corried ma vragen! Callum, take off my shoes.
Callum, take off my shoes.
Callum, don't step on my blue suede shoes! Thank you very much. Agus nuair seo, hílach an na bragan, fart na ballichin, agus gala amach sin chulbú as a búringo.
And this time he threw off his shoes and he ran away as quick as he could.
Ach, a ni tanasca van idir.
But it wasn't a ghost at all.
Si van ach da valach a ver glinging in duar an na bragan.
It was nothing but 2 silly boys that had heard they'd been gifted the shoes.
Agus, chwr a droge, big an kleisach hwfwr y doi.
And they thought it'd be funny to play a wee practical joke on this poor man.
Agus, ma si breg womse, si breg ose.
If it's a lie from me, it was a lie I was told.
Well, we haven't had many push BL so far, so I'm going to sing a bit of mouth music, probably to finish off and join in singing, dancing, and I'm sure will beatbox along. So this is a set of 3 push BL about a typical Edinburgh winter. The first one, that time I got drunk at Christmas. The second one is being chased by Donald. And the third one, many things would raise my, make me happy, but most of all, that would be wearing a kilt with a brown spot on. So,
And this is a different Donald altogether, isn't it?
different Donald indeed. So here goes with a Vishkuch and Nolligarm, that time I got drunk at Christmas. Vishkuch and Nolligarm, Haro Cheetall, your Vishkuch and Nolligarm, Hahodi to you Cowlon, Vishkuch and Nolligarm, Haro Cheetall, your Vishkuch and Nolligarm, Hahodi to you Cowlon, Hegra Healthy, Koch and Nol, your Hegra Healthy, Kogai Tausch, Hegra Healthy, Koch and Nol, your Vishkuch and Nolligarm, Hahodi to you Cowlon, Vishkuch and Nolligarm, Haro Cheetall, your Vishkuch and Nol, Hahodi to you Cowlon, Vishkuch and Nolligarm, Haro Cheetall, your Vishkuch and Nolligarm, Hahodi to you Cowlon, Hegra Healthy, Koch and Nol, your Hegra Healthy, Kogai Tausch, Hegra Healthy, Koch and Nol, your Vishkuch and Nolligarm, Hahodi to you Cowlon, Chilio, Italam, Jarchanel, Safikakam, Chilio, Italam, Jarcharodiav, Chilio, Italam, Jarichidan, Chilio, Italam, Jarcharodiav, the Dolls and Drips, Yahiris, and the Dolls and Drips, Yahiras, the Dolls and Drips, Yahiris, at all words in Yagers in a rock. Shitter at the Hawker found, Philip Becker's bottom down, cut the carriage as a tune, Peter Gonny Callister. Shitter at the Hawker found, Philip Becker's bottom down, cut the carriage as a tune, Peter Gonny Callister. Peter Gonny Callister, Peter Gonny Callister, Peter Gonny Callister, Sky Gonny Callister, Peter Gonny Callister, Peter Gonny Callister, Peter Gonny Callister, Sky Gonny Callister. Zet me jaar te neem, net de ruws van pattere, zitten me jaar te leem, zie het een moelchen. Zitten me jaar te leem, let de ruws pattere, zitten me jaar te leem, zie het een moelchen. Jeten een moelchen, jeten een moelchen, jeten een moelchen is hert en een pijlchen. Jeten een moelchen, jeten een moelchen, jeten een moelchen is hert en een pijlchen. Shutter uit de hokkenpound, vele pekkers voor een naam, kattekennetjes als joen, Pita kon je kalste. Shutter uit de hokkenpound, vele pekkers voor een naam, kattekennetjes als joen, Pita kon je kalste. Pita kon je kalste, Pita kon je kalste, Pita kon je kalste, kan je gewoon kalste. Pita kon je kalste, Pita kon je kalste, Pita kon je kalste, kan je gewoon kalste. Zit er me jaar te leem, let de ruws patterij, zit er me jaar te leem, zie je het een moelchen. Zit er me jaar te leem, let de ruws patterij, zit er me jaar te leem, zie je het een moelchen. Jeten een moelchen, jeten een moelchen, jeten een moelchen is hert en een pijlchen. Jeten een moelchen, jeten een moelchen, jeten een moelchen is hert en een pijlchen.
En dan gedaan.
Apparition. And could you please give a huge thanks to the sound person, Morak. Agus.
Massive shout out to Independence Live. You're here with us tonight. I've worked with Kevin in Independence Live for about the past, gosh, must be about 10 years, 9-10 years. We've all sorts of amazing events broadcast all around the planet. And ultimately, working with Independence Live is all about supporting the concept of Scottish self-determination. We've got a wee bit of a pedigree in running our own affairs, which goes back about 1,200 years, and yet there's certain folk think that we can't do it ourselves, which is a wee bit bonkers, really, isn't it? So to all those independence supporters out there in the channels, keeping it real, we'll get there. Just need to chip away, chip away, chip away. Thanks to everybody who came out tonight and supported this event again today, and Shannon for organising, everybody at the Storytelling Centre for making us very welcome and providing us with these lovely rustic chairs. I've got a bony arse though, so it doesn't really mix well, but no, and thanks to my daughter Kiva for coming out, and yeah, I think she's got a big future in this nonsense. Huge thanks to Gillebride for joining us. Absolute pro, as always. Completely unflappable, even having to put up with my nonsense. And to our incredible traditional storyteller who presents and this art in this manner in just a completely old school, lineaged way that you will very rarely see anywhere else, Mr. James MacDonald Reid. And it only remains to say, whatever you're up to over these few days, peakers, enjoy yourselves. And whenever you go up the road, please take care, safe home. And see you hopefully next year. Right.